In the early 1970s, the U.S. market would be assaulted by high insurance premiums and strict safety and emissions regulations, but the midsize market would still be growing in popularity. For 1971, all mid-sized Fords were Torinos, but the 1972 models were the most distinct. Starting at $2,600 to $3,500, coupes were 207 inches long on a 114-inch wheelbase. Sedans and wagons were 211 inches long and were on a 118-inch wheelbase. And weight was 3,600 to 4,400 pounds. Engines were a 4.1-liter 250 straight six with 145 gross horsepower or 95 horsepower net, or a 5-liter 302, 5.8-liter 351, 6.6-liter 400, or 7-liter 429 V8 with 210 to 370 gross horsepower, or 140 to 208 horsepower net, for a 17-second quarter mile and speeds over 120 miles an hour. Nearly 500,000 sold for the year. The Chevrolet Chevelle and Malibu of 1972 cost $2,700 to $3,500, and nearly 400,000 were sold. Coupes were 198 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase, while sedans and wagons were on a 116-inch wheelbase and were 202 or 207 inches long, weighing 3,300 to 4,300 pounds. Base engine was a 4.1-liter 250 straight six with 145 gross horsepower, or 110 net. V8s were the 5-liter 307, 5.7-liter 350, 6.6-liter 402, and 7.4-liter 454, with 200 to 370 horsepower gross, or 130 to 270 horsepower net. A 454 Super Sport did the quarter mile in under 15 seconds, and top speed was near 105. Pontiac 72 Le Mans was priced from $2,700 to $3,400, with $170,000 in sales. The two-door was 203 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase, but other body styles were on a 116-inch wheelbase and 207 to 211 inches long, weighing 3,300 to 4,200 pounds. In addition to the base 4.1-liter 250 straight six, V8s included a 5.7-liter 350, 6.6-liter 400, and 7.5-liter 455, with horsepower ranging from 145 to 325 gross, or 110 to 250 net, for a top speed near 115 and a quarter mile below 14.5 seconds. The Plymouth Satellite was restyled for 1971, costing $2,700 to $3,700. Sales were under $150,000, but they would soon go up. Coupes had a distinct front end and were 203 inches long on a 115-inch wheelbase, while four-doors were on a 117-inch wheelbase and were 202 to 211 inches long. They had a base 3.7-liter 225 slant six with optional 5.2-liter 318 and 6.3-liter 383 V8s, with 145 to 300 horsepower gross, or 110 to 250 horsepower net. Quarter mile was in the mid-15s, and top speed was near 130, and the similar Roadrunner would continue through the period, and could be had with a more powerful 440. Mercury's Montego got updated styling for 1972, and was priced from $2,800 to $3,400, with sales around $135,000. Two doors were 208 inches long on a 114-inch wheelbase, while the rest used a 118-inch wheelbase and were 212 to 215 inches long, with weight 3,700 to 4,600 pounds. Using the same engine options as the Ford, with the same 145 to 370 gross horsepower, and 95 to 208 net, as well as a quarter mile just over 17 seconds, and a top speed over 120. The AMC Matador was $2,800 to $3,500 for 1971. It was 205 to 206 inches long on a 118-inch wheelbase, and 3,300 to 3,700 pounds. More than 45,000 sold for the year, only a third of which had a V8, and 11,000 were wagons. Six-cylinder engines were the 3.8 and 4.1-liter 232 and 258, with 135 to 150 horsepower gross, or 100 to 110 net, and V8s, a 5-liter 304, 5.9-liter 360, or 6.6-liter 401, with 210 to 330 horsepower gross, or 150 to 255 net. which did the quarter mile in 15 seconds, and top speed was near 130. The Dodge Coronet of 1971 was $2,800 to $3,700, with just over 75,000 made, but no two-door was offered. A sedan was 207 inches long on a 118-inch wheelbase and weighed 3,400 to 3,700 pounds. The wagon was 5 inches longer and 400 pounds heavier. Engines included the 3.7-liter 225/6 with 145 gross horsepower, or 110 net, and the 5.2-liter 318 and 6.3-liter 383 V8s, with 230 to 300 horsepower gross, or 155 to 249 net, for speeds over 125 miles an hour and a mid-15-second quarter mile. The Oldsmobile Cutlass for 1972 was $3,000 to $3,500, with nearly 300,000 being sold. Coupes were 204 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase. Others used a 116-inch wheelbase and were 208 to 213 inches long. Weight was 3,500 to 4,200 pounds. It could be had with either a 5.7-liter 350 with 240 to 260 gross, or 160 to 200 net horsepower, or a 7.5-liter 455 with 320 to 340 horsepower gross, or 250 to 270 net. A big block car did the quarter mile in under 15.5 seconds and could exceed 130 miles an hour. Buick Skylark of the same year was about an inch shorter and about $100 cheaper, but only sold around 225,000. Its 350 had 225 to 250 gross, or 150 to 180 horsepower net, and its 455, 300 to 340 horsepower gross, or 225 to 270 net. When properly equipped, it could do the quarter mile in under 15 seconds and still do more than 110 miles an hour. In Britain, Chrysler of Europe still offered the Hillman Hunter and Humber Scepter. On a 99-inch wheelbase, they were about 170 inches long and 2,100 to 2,200 pounds. Available with a 1.5 or 1.7 liter with 64 to 94 gross horsepower, or around 54 to 77 horsepower net. Top speed was over 95, and the quarter mile took just under 19 seconds. Morris introduced the Marina for 1971 for under 1,000 pounds. It used a 96-inch wheelbase and was 163 to 166 inches long, weighing 1,900 to 2,100 pounds. Initially powered by a 1.3-liter or 1.8-liter 4 with 60 or 77 to 94 horsepower gross, or 56 and 73 to 86 horsepower net. It could nearly reach 100 miles an hour and did a low 18-second quarter mile. Ford's Mark III Cortina was introduced in 1970, 168 to 172 inches long on a 101-inch wheelbase, and 2,100 to 2,400 pounds, using either a 1.3, 1.6, or 2-liter, with 54 to 97 horsepower net. A 2000 GT could do a mid-17-second quarter mile and reach close to 105 miles an hour. The Vauxhall Victor launched in 1972 and was 179 inches long on a 106-inch wheelbase, and had either a 1.8 or 2.3 liter with 77 or 107 horsepower. Triumph's 2000 and 2.5 PI Mark II were 182 inches long on a 106-inch wheelbase and roughly 2,700 pounds. The straight sixes produced 83 to 118 horsepower for a top speed around 110. In France, the Citroën GS was introduced in 1970 and was 162 to 165 inches long on a 100-inch wheelbase and 2,000 to 2,100 pounds. Initially with a 1-liter Boxer 4 with 60 gross horsepower, or 55 net, meaning the quarter mile took less than 21 seconds, and it could nearly reach 95 miles an hour. Peugeot's 404 got chrome headlight rings for 1970. It was 175 to 180 inches long on a 104-inch wheelbase, and weighed 2,400 to 2,700 pounds, using a 1.6 or 1.8 liter with 72 to 79 horsepower gross, or 67 to 73 net, or a 1.9 liter diesel with 56 horsepower. The sportiest versions topped out over 90 and took 19.5 seconds to do the quarter mile. The Renault 12 was 171 to 174 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,000 to 2,100 pounds. most with a 1.3-liter 4 with 59 gross horsepower, or 54 net, but the Gordini used a 1.6-liter with 123 gross horsepower, or 111 net, for a 17-second quarter mile and speeds over 110. Simca's 1301 and 1501 ran until 1975. They were on a 99-inch wheelbase and 176 inches long, weighing 2,200 to 2,400 pounds. The 1.3 and 1.5-liter 4s produced 59 or 80 net horsepower for a 19-second quarter mile and 100 miles per hour. In Germany, the Wartburg 353 was mostly unchanged, and it would remain that way. It was 166 inches long on a 97-inch wheelbase and 2,000 pounds, using a 1-liter 2-stroke inline 3 with 50 horsepower. It had a claimed top speed over 80 miles an hour. Volkswagen sold nearly 370,000 Type 4s globally over 6 years. It would be revised in 1972 as the 412, which was 180 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and up to 2,500 pounds. Its 1.8-liter flat 4 produced 74 horsepower for a claimed top speed near 95 and 0 to 60 in 16.5 seconds. There were 830,000 of the original Audi 100s sold over 9 years, more than 90% of which were sedans, which were 183 inches long on a 105-inch wheelbase and 2,400 to 2,500 pounds. The 1.8-liter 4 was offered in 79 to 99 net horsepower versions. A 100 LS was a low 18-second car and could exceed 105 miles an hour. The Opel Record D arrived in 1972. It was 180 inches long on a 105-inch wheelbase and 2,300 to 2,600 pounds. Power came from a 1.7 or 1.9-liter petrol engine with 80 to 107 horsepower gross, or 65 to 95 horsepower net, or a 2-liter or 2.1-liter diesel with 54 to 59 horsepower. A 1900S coupe did the quarter mile in the low 18s and did over 100 miles an hour. The Ford Taunus of 1970 was 171 to 176 inches long on a 102-inch wheelbase, weighing 3,300 to 3,500 pounds. It offered a 4 and 1.3 and 1.6 liters with 54 to 87 horsepower, or a V6 in 2 or 2.3 liters with 89 to 107 horsepower. Net. The 2300 GT did a low 17-second quarter mile and more than 105 miles an hour. The midsize Mercedes-Benz of 1972 was offered as a 200 and 220 in petrol and diesel versions. Most were 184 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase and 2,900 to 3,000 pounds. The diesels produced 59 to 64 gross horsepower, or 54 to 59 net, and the petrol versions 103 to 114 gross, or 94 to 103 net, for up to 100 miles an hour and an 18.5-second quarter mile. BMW's New Class 2000 ran until 1972, 177 inches long on a 100-inch wheelbase, weighing 2,500 to 2,600 pounds. Horsepower was 99 to 128 net, and it could do the quarter mile in under 17 seconds and reach nearly 115 miles an hour. In Italy, Fiat's 124 Berlina continued on, and the better-equipped special version could be identified by its quad headlights. They were 160 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and 2,000 to 2,100 pounds. By 1974, engines included a 64-horsepower 1.2-liter, a 74-horsepower 1.4-liter, and a 94-horsepower 1.6-liter, which was good for a high 17-second quarter mile and speeds near 105 miles an hour. The Lancia Fulvia Berlina Series 2 was 164 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and 2,300 pounds. The V4 came in sizes from 1,200 with 84 horsepower, or 79 horsepower net, to 1,300 with up to 94 horsepower gross, or 87 horsepower net, for speeds over 100 miles an hour and a quarter mile just over 19 seconds. The Alfa Romeo Giulia of 1970 was 162 to 164 inches long on a 99-inch wheelbase and 2,200 to 2,300 pounds. The 1.3-liter came in 88 to 103 gross horsepower versions, or 77 to 86 horsepower net, and the 1.6 liter 107 to 116 gross horsepower, or 94 to 102 horsepower net, for 110 miles an hour and a high 17-second quarter mile. The Swedish Volvo 140 for 1971 gained a 2-liter with 128 horsepower. It was 183 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,600 to 2,900 pounds. In the Soviet Union, one could get a Vaz 2103 Zaguli, also known as the Lada 1500. It was 162 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and 2,300 pounds with 75 horsepower. While the Gaz 24 Volga was 186 inches long on a 110-inch wheelbase and 3,100 pounds. It had a 2.5-liter inline-4 with 94 to 109 horsepower gross, or 84 to 94 net, or a 5.5-liter V8 with 192 gross horsepower, which made it capable of a 17.5-second quarter mile and speeds over 105 miles an hour. From Australia in 1971, the Chrysler Valiant VH was 197 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase and 3,100 to 3,500 pounds. The Hemi 6 came in 4-liter 245 or 4.3-liter 265 with 165 or 202 gross horsepower, or you could get a 5.2-liter 318 V8 with 230 gross horsepower, which was a fraction quicker than the Big 6 with a mid-16-second quarter mile and a top speed of 115 miles an hour, but it didn't handle as well as the 6s. Holden's HQ sedan of the same year was 188 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase and 3,000 to 3,300 pounds. It could be had with a 2.8-liter 173 or 3.3-liter 202 straight 6 with 112 to 135 gross horsepower, while the V8s were the 4.1-liter 253 or 5-liter 308 with 185 to 240 gross horsepower for quarter-mile times in the high 15s and a top speed near 120. And Ford's Falcon was 185 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase, weighing 3,000 to 3,400 pounds, with a 3.3-liter 200 or 4.1-liter 250 straight 6 with 130 to 155 gross horsepower, or V8s in 5-liter 302 and 5.8-liter 351, Windsor or Cleveland, with 220 to 300 gross horsepower, which could do a high 14-second quarter mile and reach a top speed over 130. From Japan, Subaru introduced the Leone in 1971. It was only 157 inches long on a 97-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,700 pounds. Its 1.4-liter Boxer 4 produced 79 horsepower gross, allowing it to do the quarter mile in under 18 seconds and reach a top speed over 100 miles an hour, and was tested with an average of 25 miles per gallon. The first-generation Mitsubishi Galant of 1969 to 73 was 161 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase, initially with a 1.3 or 1.5-liter inline-4 with 94 to 103 gross horsepower, with the GS taking just over 17 seconds to do the quarter mile and nearly reaching 105 miles an hour. And in 1971, it would come to the U.S. as the Dodge Colt, with a bigger 110 horsepower 1.6-liter, and priced at $2,200 to start. In 1970, the Toyota Corona was 164 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,100 to 2,200 pounds, initially with a 1,500 or 1,600 inline-4 with 74 to 89 horsepower gross, which was increased to a 1,900 in the U.S. with 109 horsepower and costing $2,300 to $2,500. Datsun's Bluebird 510 of 68 to 73 was marketed as the best car available for $2,000, 160 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and weighing 2,100 to 2,300 pounds. Available in 1,300, 1,400, 1,500, 1,600, and 1,800, with power ranging from 71 to 113 gross. For a low 17-second quarter mile, a top speed near 110, and an average of 19 miles per gallon. While the Isuzu Florian got a bigger 1.8-liter for 1970 with 113 gross horsepower, compared to the base 83 horsepower for the 1.6-liter. It could do a mid-17-second quarter mile and nearly 105 miles an hour, and still average 18 miles per gallon. It was 170 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and 2,100 pounds. The Mazda Capella was sold in outside markets under other names, depending on the engine, such as 616 or RX2, 163 inches long on a 97-inch wheelbase and weighing 2,100 to 2,200 pounds. Most had a 1.6-liter inline 4 with 103 horsepower gross, or 74 horsepower net. But the 1100cc rotary produced 128 horsepower for a mid-16-second quarter mile and a top speed over 110. Nissan sold more than 310,000 of the third-generation Skyline, and wheelbase ranged from 98 to 104 inches, and length 163 to 174, with weight being 2,100 to 2,500 pounds. Offered with a 1.5 or 1.8-liter 4 with 94 to 103 horsepower, or with a 2-liter or 2.4-liter 6 having 113 to 128 horsepower. Gross. The 2400 GT was a mid-16-second car with a top speed of around 115 miles an hour. It was an increasingly popular segment, but still not as popular as the bigger cars, which is most likely why the cars in this segment would continue to get bigger. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.